Canada intends to recognize the State of Palestine at the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly in September 2025.
Donald Trump does not support the creation of a Palestinian state and criticised Canada's decision on social media. That will make it very hard for us to make a trade deal with them, Trump said.
The air in Ottawa is heavier than ever. With less than 1 day to go before the critical trade deadline, a political bomb has exploded across the border. Donald Trump has openly threatened to shut down trade with Canada after Prime Minister Carney confirmed plans to support Palestinian statehood if conditions are met. Just after midnight, Trump blasted on Truth Social. Wow, Canada has just announced that it is backing statehood for Palestine. That will make it very hard for us to make a trade deal with them. Oh, Canada! This wasn't diplomacy. This was a blunt ultimatum. Trump has hijacked the trade talks and turned them into a geopolitical pressure campaign. For months, negotiations have dragged on with slow progress. But now, Canada's political stance on the Israel-Palestine issue has triggered an economic threat. Trump views Canada's move as betrayal, especially while he tries to consolidate U.S. influence in the Middle East.
The president has signed that. He has increased the rate from 25% to 35%. It is important for everybody listening and watching to understand what that means.
His retaliation? A 35% tariff across Canadian goods unless Ottawa folds. Carney had previously insisted Canada wouldn't sign any deal at any cost. Now he's facing a wall of demands. Trump wants Canada to accept a deal modeled after the EU and Japan, where Washington dictates purchases and demands silence on foreign policy.
If Donald Trump's threats are real, Canada has just hours to secure a trade deal with the U.S. The deadline, midnight Eastern.
And Trump has already made a move. He just ordered a 35% tariff on semi-finished copper products from Canada effective August 1. This isn't negotiation, it's a chokehold. Within Canada, frustration is exploding. Provincial premiers, especially from Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Ontario, are publicly blasting Ottawa. One Western premier stated bluntly, "Instead of defending our economy, Ottawa's picking political fights that get working Canadians punished."
We haven't spoken to Canada today. He's called, and we'll see.
Many provinces now openly favor stronger U.S. ties, pointing out they trade more with U.S. states like Texas and Montana than with Ontario or Quebec. Some leaders even hinted at revisiting sovereignty discussions if Ottawa keeps isolating itself diplomatically and economically. If no deal is reached by August 1, Trump has vowed to impose 35% tariffs on goods not complying with CUSMA, the Canada-US-Mexico agreement. Sectors at risk include steel and aluminum, automobiles and parts, pharmaceuticals and semiconductors, softwood lumber.
1 year ago, we were a dead country. Now we're the hottest country in the world. Look at you people. We're the hottest country anywhere in the world. We're doing great.
All are now labeled national security interests by Trump, giving him legal cover for sweeping tariffs. This is an economic ransom note, plain and simple. Trump boasts about recent trade wins with the EU and Japan. Now he's sending a clear message. If Canada doesn't obey, I'll just slap tariffs and move on. Meanwhile, Canada's negotiators have little room to maneuver. Despite appearances, both Ambassador Kirsten Hillman and Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc acknowledge the odds are low for a deal before the deadline. Even Carney, while in PEI, said talks had entered an intense phase, a diplomatic way of saying everything's falling apart. This is no longer about trade, it's a raw power struggle, and Canada is caught in the middle. Trump has laid out the terms: surrender political independence or suffer a full-blown economic assault. Ottawa may be trying to hold the line, but time is running out, and the real question now isn't whether Canada will suffer, it's how deep the damage will be, and who, in the end, will pay the price.
We had a meeting. I wasn't sure. I said 50-50. I think you probably felt the same thing.
Just 1 hour. That's all it took for the President of the United States to go from calling a trade deal with the European Union a 50-50 chance, to walking onto a stage and announcing the biggest trade deal ever made. This pattern isn't new.
I think Canada could be one where they'll just pay tariffs, not really a negotiation.
Days before, Trump used the same tactic with Canada, telling reporters there might be no deal at all and that Ottawa might have to just pay tariffs. Then, almost like clockwork, he flipped the script with Europe, moving from doubt to triumph within hours. It's less about negotiation at the table and more about building suspense for a dramatic reveal. From the outside, this might look like strength, but it's also carefully staged. Much of the real bargaining happens behind closed doors, while the public announcements are crafted to create headlines. For countries like Canada, this raises a critical question. If others are signing just to escape tariffs, should Canada resist this pattern and hold out for something more substantial? What Trump calls a deal is often just a framework, broad outlines without binding details. There are no published timelines, no enforcement mechanisms, and no clear terms on what happens if a partner country fails to deliver on its promises. This ambiguity gives Trump the power to redefine the terms at any moment, even after the handshake and the cameras are gone. It's a political advantage, but it leaves trading partners exposed. For Canada, this is both a warning and an opportunity. Instead of rushing to mimic what Japan or Europe accepted, Ottawa could push for stronger, enforceable terms, a real agreement that won't shift with the president's next press conference.
Well, the bottom line is that the American people are going to be paying a 15% tax on any imports from the world's second largest collective economy, and that's the European Union. That is not a good thing for American consumers.
Behind the showmanship, someone has to pay, and that someone is the American consumer. The 15% tariff on EU imports, announced with great fanfare, applies broadly, with limited exceptions for pharmaceuticals. Steel and aluminum imports still face 50% tariffs. For everything else, the price goes up. Businesses that rely on European parts, machinery, or raw materials now face higher costs, which will inevitably flow down to consumers. Whether it's auto components from Germany or specialty foods from Italy, the checkout price in American stores is climbing. The ripple effects go even further. U.S. small businesses that assemble imported goods or use European inputs in manufacturing will be hit the hardest. Unlike multinationals, they have limited ability to absorb cost increases or reconfigure supply chains. For many, this means slowing hiring, cutting hours, or passing costs directly to customers. In a fragile inflationary environment, these hidden taxes could undercut household budgets and business confidence alike. Meanwhile, the much-hyped benefits, like $600 billion in European investments or $750 billion in energy purchases, are vague and spread over years. There's no guarantee how much of that will create jobs or lower prices for ordinary Americans. In the short term, it's a tax disguised as a trade victory. This is where Canada might find leverage. By aligning with U.S. industries that depend on cross-border trade, such as auto manufacturers in Michigan or food processors in Wisconsin, Canada can highlight how tariffs hurt both economies.
We will, obviously, we're working on behalf of Canadians, and we will agree a deal if there's one on the table that is in the best interest of Canadians, just as the United States will do, and we'll use all the time that's necessary. And agree something that's in the interest of Canadians, if that's available.
The urge to sign a quick deal is understandable. No country wants to face 25% or 35% tariffs. But speed is not the same as substance. Trump's pattern of declaring no deal and then staging a victory is powerful media theater. Yet Canada doesn't have to play along. A slower, more deliberate path could secure terms that truly protect Canadian businesses while avoiding the hollow optics that others have settled for. In trade, as in politics, it's not about who signs first, it's about who walks away with something real.
U.S. President Donald Trump says he has struck his biggest trade deal yet, and he's agreed to a trade framework with the European Union.
We've reached a deal. It's a good deal for everybody, I believe.
The United States and the European Union have agreed to a new trade framework. At the center of it, a 15% blanket tariff on most European goods entering the U.S. pharmaceuticals are exempt. But steel and aluminum from the EU will still face the steep 50% tariff imposed under national security provisions. In exchange, the EU committed to $750 billion worth of energy purchases from the United States and pledged $600 billion in new investments. They also agreed to significant defense procurement, although no figures were disclosed. This deal is not a binding treaty. It's a framework, announced just days before a 30% tariff was set to take effect. That timing wasn't accidental. It followed the same pattern we've seen in other Trump-era negotiations: pressure, then deal.
$750 billion worth of energy. To agree to invest into the United States $600 billion.
It's 15% tariffs across the board, all inclusive. The investments Mr. President just described, and the purchases over there. Indeed, basically the European market is open. It's 450 million people.
This isn't a one-off. We've already seen similar structures in deals with Japan, the United Kingdom, and Vietnam. In each case, Trump threatened steep tariffs. Then, after days or weeks of speculation, a framework was announced, usually built around a 15% baseline tariff and large-scale investment or procurement from the foreign side. This model flips the trade conversation. It's not about removing barriers. It's about creating predictability and charging for it. Trump's 15% now feels moderate, simply because the alternative he threatens is always worse. That's not trade liberalization. It's transactional stability. And the pattern is clear. Allies, competitors, everyone pays. Now, all eyes turn to Canada. A 35% tariff is scheduled to take effect on August 1st if no deal is reached. Ottawa has made it clear. The deadline is political, not legal. And they won't be rushed into a bad agreement. But the EU and Japan were longtime US allies too, and both had to accept Trump's terms. Canada knows that. And while it hasn't signed any framework, it's not sitting idle. Canada brings leverage to the table. Over $1 trillion in investment into the US, a deeply integrated energy and auto supply chain, and decades of cross-border ties with key American states. Alberta's oil, Ontario's parts plants, these aren't abstract advantages. They're real points of influence. Carney's government is watching the sequence, not resisting it. The strategy isn't to be first, it's to be smart. The federal government has already moved to manage public expectations. Early promises of a good deal have shifted into a more realistic message. This will be about managing trade-offs. The lessons are clear. No country has secured full exemptions. Baseline tariffs are now the floor. And rushing into a vague framework, like what Japan and the EU accepted, might avoid pain in the short term, but lead to problems later. Instead, Ottawa is preparing, working with provinces, identifying sectors that need shielding, and exploring room for targeted offsets. Trade diplomacy is still happening, just not on Trump's schedule. Trump's trade system isn't built on trust. It's built on leverage and price tags. But that doesn't mean Canada has to fold. It means Canada has to design, shape a deal that protects what matters most, whether that's auto, energy, or digital trade. The real danger isn't delay, it's giving in too early for too little. In this new world, the countries that hesitate might get hit. But the countries that rush, they might get locked into terms they regret. And Carney knows, better to sign the right deal late than the wrong deal too soon.